What is going on? Why can't I move? Oh, I think it's the city of Marinathis. The hitbox is massive. Okay. So, hello everyone, and welcome to part 4 of my Artisan Workshop, my Artisan Workshop tutorial series. And the last time we got to the point where we have our artisan beer item, our custom new item, and we added some functionality to it so that there's some use case for the item. There's some reason to want to have this item. So now I was thinking that next thing we could do is to change the item, the mesh you see here, and also here. So we can load our own thing instead of using the default beer one. So that was what I'm planning to do next. Hello Marke, hello Fleson. How are you guys doing? I hope you're having a great day. So, and load assets into the game, we need to start the game in the modding kit mode. So if we go to the Steam and we have our tools, we can go into the modding kit. And when you launch this, you need to make sure that you have your mod enabled, like you were launching the game normally. And then we click play. And you will get some errors here about missing DLLs, but these are fine. These are not fatal errors. And once we get into the modding kit, you can go into the editor, and this will be the scene editor. I can show it quickly. So you can go into the scene editor where you can edit maps. And then you can leave edit mode to go back into the main menu. We are interested in the resource browser, so I press Alt tilde to open the developer console, just like in the normal game. And then I type this one, resource.show resource browser, to bring up the resource browser. And here we can see a bunch of assets from the native module. So there's all sorts of armors and stuff, props for the scenes, for one of the towns, I guess. Oh, like a ton of assets here in the native. And actually you should, and if our module was showing here, it would be here. I guess I'm actually not sure why it's not showing now, but let's go into Artisan Beer and let's create, this is the module folder inside Bannerlord, and let's just create new asset sources here. Okay. And this will be the place where we place our raw assets. So we will export from Blender like the model files into this folder, and if we do some 2D stuff, we can also put that stuff in here. So if we, let me actually check. Let me check if right. I think we need assets folder. So I think the reason why we don't see our thing here is because I don't have asset folder here. So let me create asset folder here. And let's try to reopen. No. Let's try to reopen the whole thing then. Here we go. Open the resource browser again. No, we still don't see our module here. Very annoying. Yeah, I need to figure out assets. Okay. Assets. Okay, so if we create assets folder here, then hopefully we can see our module in the list of we can see our module in the resource browser. Okay, so now you can see we got new module here, which is our artisan beer module. And this is where we can, once we import our assets, we can see them here. If we just look, so let's type something here, for example, like wood. So you can see that there will be textures like this, meshes. These are normal maps and other sorts of maps. Height map, I guess, normal map and specular map. Normal maps, you will see all sorts of assets here. And you can also use this to find assets that you can use. So if you, for example, want to find mesh, you can search for something and then limit your search based on the type. So if you wanted to find, for example, if you wanted to use this one for your artisan beer, that would be a pretty good option, right? So this is mead underscore cup underscore wooden underscore C. So you could just use this mesh if you don't want your own. But let's say that we want our own mesh in this case. So now, if we want our own mesh, we need to use Blender to create one. So I will quickly go through the basic operation in Blender. So you can rotate the camera pressing middle mouse button, and there are two modes. Well, actually, so there's up on the top you can see these are tabs, and each tab up here corresponds roughly with like one sort of workflow. So kind of the default one is modeling, where you create new models, create new meshes. And there's more advanced ones like sculpting, UV editing we will go into soon. And there's a bunch of other ones related to animation and making movies and other stuff. Modeling is like the base or the most basic workflow, I guess. And then there are two modes. So this is this mode where you see these individual vertices, corners. This is edit mode, and by pressing tab I can go into object mode, and you actually see your mode here in the top left corner. So object mode, edit mode, and in the object mode I can delete this cube if I don't like it. So press delete, and the whole cube is gone now. In the top right corner you can see all the objects in this thing. So now we have deleted our cube, and let's say we wanted something that looks roughly like a cup. But so let's make a cylinder. So I press Shift A to add. You could also press F3 to open this search and like type cylinder here, I guess. Type cylinder here. And let's just say that this already is like good enough for us, because I don't want to go too deep into modeling right now. So you could press the basic commands in Blender would be pressing G to move stuff and pressing S to scale, and I guess those would get you pretty far. And if you go into edit mode, you can Alt A to deselect, and I can press C to open this other selection tool. I can select everything on the top, and then press G to move just the top part. So let's say I want to make my cup a bit taller, so I can just Then once I press G, you can see that I can move them in like 3D space. But if I press middle mouse button while I'm moving this, I can lock it into one. I can lock it into one axis. And let's say this is a bit too tall, so let's bring it down a bit. And there are a bunch of really good 3D editing tutorials, and you can learn a lot more from those. I can just let me very quickly show how this would roughly work. So you could do something like this. So I pressed E. I pressed E here to make an extrusion. Extrusion is basically just copying like your current selection, and then you can do some operation on it. So I can extrude, scale up down a bit, and then do another extrusion and go down. Well, I managed to do it once, so yeah. Go down, and let's say this is our cup. Okay, I don't want to spend too much on the modeling part, but the important things for exporting into any game engine basically is that you need to have UV map, and you need to have a material. So to add materials in Blender, you have to have your object selected, and then you come here to material properties. And you see here we have no materials at the moment. And now I can add a new one, and that's basically everything you need to do for exporting, because we want to set the materials in the game and not actually in the Blender. Because if we spend a lot of time making great materials inside Blender, that work will be kind of wasted once we go into the game and we have to use the game's materials anyway. But another thing that we need is UV map. So UV map is something that is used to like make basically mapping between the 3D object and the 2D textures, because the textures are always in 2D. It would be kind of hard to work with 3D pictures, I guess. Like all the texture editing programs are 2D, so we need to have some sort of mapping between the 2D texture and the 3D object. So that is what UV editing is. And what you see on the left here is the current mapping. So if I deselect everything here and select just the bottom, well, and some other things apparently, you can see that this is where the bottom is and stuff like that. And there is actually automatic way of generating these UV mappings inside Blender, and that's what I will be using. So I will do Smart UV Project. I just type F3 to open the search and type Smart, or I could type UV. Well, I guess Smart is better. I can type Smart and do Smart UV Project, and that will give me like good enough UV mappings if I don't care about it too much. And this is so that this will also like work nicely with the materials inside the game, and the materials inside the game will use the UV mappings that I create here. So basically we have our material and we have our UV map. So now we are ready to just export. So I go to File and Export to FBX. FBX is the best file format, I guess, for I mean, it's the one that Bannerlord accepts most easily. So if I go to the game asset sources folder, and this is where I will export this FBX. So if I copy this path and paste it here, let's call this my cup FBX. Let's export this FBX here, and then inside the editor resource browser, I like an import new asset. That is actually the wrong project. And here, important that you select meters as your unit, because inside Blender, the default is that 1 unit is 1 meter. So this is actually 2 meters right here. You see this is 1 unit and 1 unit. So the whole cylinder is 2 meters wide. And it says unable to find material for mesh cylinder. That is fine. And it will say that there's an error, but we don't think this is a bad error. So we just click through. And you can see that our cylinder, our mesh is now, our mesh was called cylinder inside Blender here. So now we can actually rename this like my cup. And if we go, and we can right click this and re-import. No. Oh, I didn't export. If I now, okay, it says update, so we want to update. Always ignore failure. So now if we double click my cup, we get this view where we can change the material. So let's say I want this to be like a pine or something. Pine. Some sort of tree bark. Let's say this is fine by me. Well, this looks kind of weird. So this artifacting is because of like our UV map does not work nicely with this material. So you see here in our UV map, this part is kind of very large, so it will look kind of artifacty here because each one of these segments is very long on the y-axis here. Let's see if we have some other options. Well, I guess all of them will look kind of bad. Huh. No, actually. Well, I'm not sure. Let's see where... Okay. I wonder why the inside looks bad, but the outside looks fine. Doesn't really matter too much. This would be how you would create new model from scratch. So you need to add your material and you need to have your UV maps, and then you can just import it into the game like this. Let's say I'm not a professional modeler and I don't really want to do this myself. There's also a ton of resources for models. So let's say you could go to a site like BlendSwap. So this is popular Blender file place where people can share their Blender files. And if we just search for beer here, you can get free models, stuff like this. Medieval beer mugs with the Creative Commons license. So let's just download this. I guess I need to log in and remove this. Okay, so now that we have logged in the BlendSwap, we can just download this Blender file. And then we can go take a look if it is something that we can use in the game. So I will take this into my artisan beer. Let's create new folder inside my my solution folder, which I will call Asset Originals. And then we can just open this in Blender. and see if this looks like something that we can use. Let me actually close this old one, and I don't think I need to save that. Okay, so let's go into modeling view. I don't need 3 mugs, just one would be good enough for me. And let's say I want this middle one. I'm happy with this one. So then let's see the scale. So this would be 1 meter right here. Looks kind of big. So this would be like 30 centimeters or something. I don't think beer mugs are that large. So let me scale it down a bit, pressing S, and just move my mouse so that it becomes a bit smaller. I guess that looks fine. If this is 1 meter, we can change it later as well. One other thing is that eventually I will actually want to use this model in an animation where I want someone to hold this cup by the handle. So for that to work nicely, we can move it so that the handle is in the center. So the handle will be at the 0, 0 point, and the 0, 0 point is where these lines intersect, like right here where this dot is right now. So I can just move it a bit by pressing G and then locking it into some axis. Now the center is roughly where the handle is, or roughly where the hand should be. Maybe a bit the hand. I think the hand, when the hand takes handle hold of this cup, I think it needs to be roughly there. So now let's say that the cup is in the correct position, so that we can just immediately plug it into some animation where someone is holding it. And also, let's check the materials. What is the mod going to do? There is an introductory video on my channel where you can go check what the mod is going to be about. It's going to be about Artisan Brewery. So there will be kind of some new functionality added to the workshop. So let's just export this now and see how it will look in game. Let me save first. Let me export into the asset originals. No, let's export into the asset sources inside the game. So here. Okay, and this will be. I should also rename this actually. So let's rename this mesh to Artisan Beer Mesh. Very original. Okay. If we go into the resource browser, import new asset. Check that the units are in meters. And now we get our mesh inside here. If we try to put material on it, you will see that it will look very strange. Let's see, something like wood. You will see that it will look very strange. This is because we didn't check the UV maps. So we go into edit mode, select everything. You can see that the UV maps for this object are very strange looking. So they are basically just 1 points or like single points here. So the UV mapping is not what we want for the game engine. So we have to again come here and do smart UV project. And now Blender will create this UV mapping for us. And now we can re-export this. And now if we try to add material here, something like pine, you can see that the material works a lot nicer. Let's say I want to add another material here. So let's say I wanted, for example, these parts here, which go around the cup. I want those to be metallic. So what I could do is add new material here in Blender. So on top of this wood material, I will go into my material properties and click here on the plus icon to add new material. And this will be metal. Then I can select everything I want to be in this metal color. I will, so I make sure that I'm in edit mode, and I can press here to select face select mode. And the face select is just that instead of, if I'm in vertex select mode, you can see that I see all these points, and in face selection mode, I will select just these faces. And when you're assigning materials, the face selection makes the most sense. So I can just press C again to bring up this. Oh, wait, what? Oh, okay. So let's do it like so. Select this whole ring. I can hold Alt and then click somewhere on a face that is part of a ring. So it will select the whole thing around here. And let me actually go into modeling view so that it will not show the textures. So if I hold Alt and click here, you will see that it selects everything vertically. And if I hold Alt and click on the left side, it will do ring select but horizontally. So now it selects everything here. And if I look down here and do another, hold Shift and Alt, and do another ring selection, it will select this whole ring. I come here, hold Shift and Alt, do another ring selection, and then pick my metal material and assign. And that will assign all the faces that we have selected to this metal material. Then I can come here, select this, select this, select this. And you see that I have some extra selection here that I did not want. So I can hold Shift and click all the faces that I did not want. Let's assume I want this face to be all metal. And there are better ways to do this if you are actually proficient with Blender, but for now I'm kind of rusty. So just make sure that everything you want selected is included. Okay, and let's assign these to metal as well. And now if we save and export, you will see that we have two materials here inside the asset browser. So the first one we can add to something like, we can put something like birch. And the second one we can just find some metal. Let's see, like iron. Let's say crude iron. And immediately this looks kind of silly because this is way too thick. So I want to come here and do another ring selection here, and then I can press S to scale this ring, make it a lot smaller. I can press Shift to do finer adjustments. Let's make it like kind of small. Then I can do another ring selection here. Press C and then middle click to deselect all these parts that I don't want, but I want these. And then do another scaling operation, so press S. And then I can hold shift to do finer scaling. Okay, let's say that looks fine. Maybe it needs to be a bit larger so that there's no issues here. Now if I export this again, actually one thing that you see that every time I load, I lose the materials. So let's say I find something that I actually like. Let's look for wood texture that is pretty good. Let's say I like this wood section _B. So what I can do is come here in Blender and actually name this wood section _B with the same name as the material that I like. And then it will actually remember it when I export this. And let's find, this was something like crude iron, looked pretty good. So crude _iron looks fine. So now I can come here and rename this metal material to crude iron. Yes. So this looks decent. And actually now looking at this, I can tell that these parts don't really make sense when they are metallic. They would be better as wooden. So let's go back here and reselect these parts and make them wooden again. Okay, so this should all be wood, I think. And here, I think this will look fine if this part is metallic. That will fine, I think. So we can select wood here, or a wood section B, and assign to make these back into wooden ones. And if we save and export, now it will actually remember our material selections. You could press always update here, I guess, but we are almost done anyway. So now let's say I like how this looks. Let's say I'm happy with this. So now we can actually use this in game. That is what we actually want to do, right? So to do that, let's go into our Artisan Beer mod and let me open code here so that I can go edit the XMLs. Oh, this is not the correct directory. I open code in my module. Oh, this is mods. Sorry, I'm lost. So I go into the Bannerlord Steam directory modules, open code here where my XML files are. And here in the beer item XML, our mesh was called Artisan Beer Mesh. And that is everything you need to do to use your custom mesh for an item object. And we can also go check that it actually works. Actually, now I remember that. Okay. I need to do the change here as well. How do I actually... How should I explain this? So I have a small issue with the XML files in this project because of reasons related to the tutorial, but whatever. So we come to the beer item XML and we change it to Artisan Beer Mesh here, the mesh object. And if we just launch Bannerlord now, You should see the changes. Okay. So now in game, you can see it has correctly loaded our custom model, and it also automatically updates this thumbnail for the item based on the mesh, which is very nice. Okay, so that is my crash course into Blender. I hope it's not too disorienting in the flow. One thing, like if you really don't want to do the modeling yourself or use assets you get from the internet, in the asset browser in the resource browser you can just also search for stuff like cup, and you will get tons of options from the existing game file. So let's say, like, for example, this meat cup, for some reason the material is kind of messed up here, but there should be something that looks decent as well. You could go through this and look for something that you can use yourself without using custom assets. This one looks fine. This is meat cup wooden _b. And also one thing that we need to remember to do is, since we used assets from here, we should attribute the creator. So let me put this into my project readme before I forget. So beer mug asset by. Let's copy the path or the URL here. Let's save it in our readme. That way we don't forget to attribute them later as well when we need to attribute them on Nexus mods when we go to publish our mod. Okay. How would fur work, you think, Flesson? What would fur do? So do you mean like custom workshop that works with fur somehow? And this part, if you only care about programming, so if you only care about getting your mod work, care about. Let me phrase this. Let me think about the phrasing here. If you only care about the functionality of your mod and not the aesthetics so much, or if you are more like even more oriented towards programming, you could easily skip this part and just continue with the series without loading custom assets. But for documentation, it's nice to. So I think for documentation, it's nice to have everything in one place. So I wanted to include even loading custom assets in this series. Because Sturgeon needs shops bad and have quite a bit of fur villages. Yeah? I guess so. Okay, so let me put this into. Let me push this into Git. Okay. But that is really everything you need to do to load your own custom assets into your item objects. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next part. And maybe I continue. Next would be campaign behavior affecting the wider game state. I feel like that was kind of weak. I mean, it's too much stuff, I think. Too much... too many things to explain. The Blender stuff is kind of... I don't have enough time to properly explain the Blender stuff. I think it will be hard to follow. I don't know if I should have done it simpler or it's fine. I know from experience that Blender is sort of... it's a program where it's easy to do like silly mistakes and not understand what you did wrong. Needs some experience to understand your mistakes and stuff like that. But I mean, it's a great program, so I would kind of also encourage people to try it out. But I'm just afraid that it will look too daunting. Just afraid that it will look too difficult if I do stuff too fast, but I don't know. Yeah, I think eventually you would want to expand this mod so that there's like custom stuff for every type of workshop. But you would also need to have imagination to like determine what the better items should do. Like what would be better fur item? I don't know. Like if it's just like some custom armor or something, I'm not sure how interesting that is. Some sort of custom cape, for example, from fur. Like if it's just a bit more stats or something. Not sure how that would work game mechanics wise. So one thing that I need to figure out is how do I want to do this XML editing part. So my issue at the moment is that I have the XMLs in my source directory for the Git integration. But every time I rebuild this project, it will override the files in the modules. Can you 3D print that? Technically, yes, but it might be difficult to do because this is not really designed for 3D printing, and also usually 3D prints are done in CAD software and not in modeling software. I'm not sure how easy or difficult it would be to convert the files between the two. So Blender, I guess it's easy. I guess you can 3D print this, but I don't have a 3D printer, so I cannot do it. At the moment, I'm sort of wondering if I should redo this whole part. Maybe try to make it a bit simpler somehow. I don't feel, I think it will be, if I leave it like that, it will be kind of not up to the standard. Yeah, I think I'll redo the whole thing. So let me come here and do delete changes. Okay, let me redo this episode. Okay. So there were a couple issues here. One was that I did not know the correct folder name here for it to show up in the resource browser and small stuff like that. I actually want to try it out now. So at what point do I have to create the assets folder for it to show up? So if I come here, resource browser, and if I create the folder now and assets, no. So that's not enough. So you really need to, that seems kind of weird. You really need to delete the whole, or restart the whole thing for it to show up. So I need to do that first. Before starting the mod kit. Okay. Okay. This is also something that is so incredibly unnecessarily difficult to, oh, it's not here. Assets. What? I don't understand this again. Now it is here. What? Let me delete this again. Huh. Okay, so I guess you need both of these directories or something? I don't know. Small stuff like this can really trip you up sometimes. So let's create assets and asset sources here. Okay. I just want to test this so that I know how it works when I actually record this again. Okay. Fine then. Let's just create both of those directories beforehand. Okay, and let's make sure that we have, let's make sure that we get back into state that we had before the episode so that I can sort of seamlessly start it over. Okay. I think everything looks good. This asset originals I don't want. Okay. One thing that I want to set up right now is I want to put my Visual Studio Code here actually. So if you're trying to follow at home, I would recommend that you edit the XMLs directly in the game module. At least, and only periodically put them into your Git or something. I don't know. Oh, I guess you need to figure out your own workflow because I don't have a really good solution for that. So the issue is that if you're using the template, mod template, it will keep overriding your files. I guess one thing I can do is not actually put them here. Oh, that might be a better solution. Yeah. Yeah, okay. That's actually even better. So let me module data outside. So this is so that this is kind of not, this is not in the scope of the tutorial. So that, so the underscore module is something that is copied by the mod template. And the idea is that you can keep your module data and all your stuff in there, but it has some annoying parts about it. So, such as not always copying your files unless you do complete rebuild. So I don't like that too much. So I'd rather just, for the sake of simplicity, I would rather just people edit the XMLs directly in the game folder. Okay, this is still wrong. So this should be, I should revert this to whatever it was in the past. Or actually I can just, okay, let's do this. Okay. Good. Okay. So I think I will take a short break and then attempt again to record that episode where we import a custom module. Okay, if that's on, I will actually I can check it. Maybe, well, let me see. Kind of out of it at the moment, so I think I will just try to do my best to record a good episode. Okay. Okay, let's try again. Let's try this again. And this time I will skip the doing the model yourself part. So let's go straight for taking someone else's work. I think that will be more in the scope of things. And then I can just do the small edits that I want by myself and then be done with it. Okay. So let's start again from the part where we look at the existing state. Okay. Okay, let's start the episode now. Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to the part 4 of the Artisan Workshop Modding tutorial series. And in this episode, I will load a custom model into the game, into our mod, and try to make the artisan beer item use that custom model that we load. And if you're interested only in the programming side of things or just making stuff work in general, and not so much in the assets, you can freely skip this part, or you can look up some assets already in the game that you can change this mesh to. But I want to show how to load custom assets in this series as well. So let's do it now. So to load assets, we need to use the official modding kit. But before we open this up, actually, let's go into the modules and into our module. And let's create 2 new folders for the assets. So let's create assets, and let's create another one that is asset sources. And this I want to create because these are required for our mod to show up in the modding kit, otherwise in the resource browser of the modding kit. Otherwise, it will not register this mod as something that has resources. Another thing that you need to check is once you launch your modding kit, in the mods, you should have the mod that you're working on selected here. Okay. Now we can just launch this. And when you launch this, there will be a couple of errors. It's saying that it's missing some XMLs, but we can ignore these. They are not fatal errors. We can still use the resource browser even with these errors. So this is the editor, and if you click here, you can go into the scene editor. Right now, I'm not interested in the scene editor, but this is where you can edit maps. Instead, I want to press Alt tilde here and go into the resource browser. So resource.show resource browser. Here you can see 2 modules, native and our module with the assets folder that we created beforehand. If we didn't create this folder, it would not show up here. And here, if we look at what native has, there are tons of different textures and meshes and props. You can find all sorts of things here. And you can also look up their IDs. For example, if you search here for a cup in the native, you can find a bunch of cups and look up their mesh ID and then use those in your mods as well. But for now, let's say that we actually want our own asset. So, but let's instead of doing the whole modeling ourselves, there are a bunch of places where you can get free 3D models with good licenses. So for example, excuse me. For example, one website where you can download Blender files, Blender model files, is this BlendSwap. And if we just search for beer here, we get this medieval beer mugs thing that looks very good for us. So we can just download this and let's take the license, CC BY. So assuming that I want to use this, I should also update my README so that I don't forget to attribute. So let's do this. And let's take this URL as well. And we also need to remember to attribute them when we upload the mod to Mods Nexus. So let's just do this so that we don't forget it. And let's open this up in Blender to see how it looks. Well, first of all, let me move it from downloads into my project folder. Let's create new one here, which will be asset originals. And let me move the blend file here. And if we just click this to open it in Blender, we will see that it has 3 mugs, but we only want 1. So let me quickly give a very quick run through of how to use Blender. There are a ton of great tutorials for Blender already online, but I just want to give you the very basic working knowledge. So these tabs on the top, each of these tabs corresponds to one workflow that people want to use Blender for. So the basic one is modeling, is perhaps the most common one, and there are more advanced ones like sculpting, and then a bunch of animation stuff and movie. If you're making movies inside Blender, tab for composing, and bunch of advanced stuff. But typically, we will be using just the modeling workflow and the UV editing workflow. And I will explain the UV editing a bit later. We don't need 3 cups, so I can just left click this and delete, press Del to delete, and left click this to delete and delete. And we are left with just 1 cup now. And basic commands here, like you can press G to move stuff, and S to scale, and R to rotate. And each of these inside Blender, each these units, so you see this square here, this is 1 meter by 1 meter. So you see that this cup is quite large. It's like 40 centimeters or something, so let's make it a bit smaller. Just pressing S and then moving my mouse so that it becomes a bit smaller. I also want to move it so that the handle is in the origin. So the origin is where these lines meet, the 0, 0 point, where this small dot is right now. So let's press G, and after pressing G, I press middle mouse click to lock it into one axis. So first I move it on the x-axis, and then I move it on the z-axis. Now I think the origin is where I want this cup to be held from. So you imagine someone's hand grabbing this mug. That is where I would think that their hand will be in the animation. Okay. So now I think we should look at the UV editing. So in order to get models to display correctly inside Bannerlord or any other game engine, you need to set up materials. And the way that the game engines work is that they want to control the materials themselves. So it's not worth our time setting up complicated materials inside Blender, because those would be overridden by the game materials anyway. So we just want to set up very basic materials that we can later assign inside the game, inside the resource browser of the modding kit. But first, we need to make sure that our object has reasonable UV maps. So inside this UV editing workflow, we can edit the UV maps. And UV maps are the mapping between the 3D object and the 2D textures. Because the textures are always 2D, you need to have UV mapping. And I can just select everything. So I go into edit mode. There are edit mode and object mode. So here I need to go into edit mode to select all the faces of the object. I can press A. Let me deselect everything, and then I can press A to select everything. And then I press F3 to open this search. This is like a function search. And I want Blender to auto-generate UV maps for me because I don't want to do the UV mapping myself. So I need to type smart UV project. And default settings are fine. And now you can see that it generated. This is the UV mapping you see on the left. Each of the parts of the model is mapped into one point or like one section of this texture. And this is what this works well for Bannerlord and for our purposes. So this looks like fine UV map. So now I think we are ready to try to export this. So we export into FBX. And let me go into my, let's go into the game modules and asset sources. Let me copy this and export it into here. Just export with default settings, medieval beer marks, FBX. This looks fine. Now we can go into our resource browser. So inside our modding kit, we can come into assets, right click this zone, or we can either right click here and import new asset, or press here to scan new asset files. But let's import new asset this way and go into the asset sources. And then it brings up this FBX import settings for import settings of our FBX file. And we want to make sure you have the unit is set to meters because meters is the Blender default. So 1 unit is 1 meter. And here, once I click import, it will say that it's missing materials. These warnings are fine. You can just click OK, do not send crash report, and always ignore this type of failure because it's not actually an error. It just says that it could not find the material. So here we have specified the material is wood 1, and there is no such material in the game. So it gives an error about that. So now you see that this is what our object looks like now. But we can just select one material here. Instead of having no material, we can select let's search for wood. And this looks fine. Wood section _B. And this is what our model looks like in game right now. And that's already pretty good. And if I want to get rid of the error on the future exports, I can come here to material properties and rename this material into whatever the asset that we liked was. So wood section _B. That was the material that we selected and liked. Okay, but I would actually like these rims or whatever these rings to be metallic. So let's try to do that. And let me go back into modeling view and make sure that I'm in edit mode again. So I can press tab to switch between edit mode and object mode, or I can click here and go into edit mode. And I want to select all these rings. And let me first go into face select mode, where I'm selecting whole faces instead of in vertex select mode. I'm selecting just these corners. So I want to set all these faces into this new material. Let me actually create the material. So I want this to be metallic. Let's create placeholder material name. Let's say metal. And then to select these rings, I will hold Alt and click here on the left side, and it will select this horizontal. This is called ring select, I believe. If I click on the top, it will try to do it vertically, but let's do horizontal one. And then I press Shift and Alt both and do another ring select here and another ring select here. Then I select my metal material and assign everything. Assign will set everything that is selected into this new material. Let's also say this should be metallic and this should be metallic. Let's select metal and assign. Here the same thing. I want this to be metallic. Oh, I want this to be oh, I'm having slight trouble here. Okay, the ring selection is not working at the moment, so let me do this manually. So I want these to be metallic. I think I want this to be metal as well. I think that will look fine. So this will now be metallic, and then I want to do ring select here and here. And I want to include this, but not these ones. So I can press C to enter this, what is this called? Like, well, more convenient selection mode, circle selection mode. And then I can press middle mouse click to unselect. And then I could press left click to select, but let's unselect everything here. And assign these to our metal material. Well, great. We want this one as well. Okay, so this should be metallic as well. Now we can save and re-export. Oh, actually one more thing. We saw here that our object was called cup2. And that is the name that we have specified here in Blender for this object. So we can call this Artisan Beer Mesh. Let's save and let's export. And it will say this file has been modified, the FBX file has been modified, so we can click always update. Okay. Some spam in the chat. Let me see, where was I? So now it reloaded our FBX, and you can see that the wood material is here, but the metal is set to none because we just put some placeholder name there. And let's search for iron, and let's see, crude iron. And if I decide this looks fine, I can come back to Blender and actually set the material name to crude iron. Let's say I like this one, so let's rename the material to crude iron. Save. And so this looks fine, but I don't like how these rings are so thick here. So I can just quickly go back into Blender and select everything with this material. Deselect the parts that are wrong. And if you want to learn more about Blender, there is a lot to learn. I recommend you, if you want to be more serious about 3D modeling, you can look it up at some like dedicated Blender tutorials. And I think I have Oh, actually, this is wrong. I didn't want these ones to be selected. So now if I select just these faces and then scale down, you can see that I can make these rings a bit smaller. Actually, I want to do it separate scaling for each of them. So let me do it like that. Okay. There are a lot better Blender tutorials out there, but it is kind of a whole thing on its own. So, but now these look fine to me, and I can export again. And it will reload it. And this looks good to me. So now, if we look again at the resource browser, it will tell us that we have Artisan Beer Mesh assets in our module now, which is what we want. And now we can actually just use it. So we can go into our XML editor where we have the item, and we can just type in Artisan Beer Mesh here for our mesh name, and that should just work in game. So now we are done with the modding kit. We can close the modding kit and then launch the game again from Visual Studio. Now inside the game, we should see that the Artisan Beer item has our new mesh attached to it, and thumbnail looks good. This looks good. So I think we can be happy with this. And that is how you add new custom assets or custom meshes in this case, but also you can use the resource browser to add another types of custom assets as well, but that is its own thing. But that is how you load custom mesh into Bannerlord, and how you can get, if you're not, how you can get meshes from online if you want to use someone else's resources, but also make sure to attribute them correctly if you use stuff from other people. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another episode where we will do some more programming again. And yeah, thank you for watching. Okay, I think that will work better than the previous one. But I guess I'm done for now then. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in the future.